Kia ora koutou, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zulfikar. I'm one of the councillors chairing this morning's meeting. We start the 7th session of the LTP submission hearings. Health and safety notices. If you hear any alarm, please exit from the nearest available exit and evacuate to the assembly area, which is the Timarai Oheni on your backside in the square. And smoking is obviously prohibited within any council public entrance building or site. And a defibrillator is in front house on the ground floor. And if you have any incidents or near miss, please report it to the committee administrator. This meeting is being recorded, available on council's website, live streaming, and it is also available on YouTube channel. And we take apologies now. So we have apologies from the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hepita, Councillor Dingwall, Councillor Bowen, who are absent on council business, and also apology from Councillor McLeod. I am happy to move it, and thank you, Councillor Hancock, for seconding it. I invite you to vote. It's carried 100%. Is there any declaration of interest? Not as far as I know. Councillor Johnson.
Just to note that I am a member of the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group, but I haven't been involved in making the submission.
Thank you, and so do I. Any other? Thank you. And she's not here, I guess. Thank you. So, do we need to read resolution now?
Yes, we need to resolve this one, yes.
Okay. So, the committee resolved to note the procedure of hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet, and the procedure sheet is available on the table near the entrance. So, okay. Can I have a, Councillor Hancock, can I have a seconder? Councillor Beatty, thank you. So do you need to ask for the comments or not? So I invite you to vote on this one. Not me. It's all right. It's carried 100%, 9 in favor, no against or abstentions. Thank you. So we have a long list of submissions, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll be following a strict timekeeping rule. So I'll be inviting the submitters on the front table, and when you come for speaking, please say your name because it's being recorded and some people might be watching online. And when you start your speaking, there is a traffic light system. The green light gives you 7 minutes. The yellow gives you another 2 minutes. And when it goes to red, it's the final minute. And if you want the councillors to ask you some questions, please allow a few minutes for questions. And even if you finish in the first few minutes and you don't want to answer any questions, raise your left hand and I'll understand and we'll finish the hearing. Is that all right? So I invite the first submitter is Rebecca Lovell from Awapuni Park Community and Recreation Center. Welcome, Rebecca. I guess you understand the time system?
Yes, thank you.
The floor is yours whenever you are ready.
Ko te mea tuatahi, ko te wehi tonu ki a ihua, nāna nei te mātatanga, me te mūtanga o ngā mea katoa. He mihi nui tēnei to all the councillors, ki ngā taumātua, ki ngā kuia, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Rebecca Lovell and I'm proud to be on the committee for the Awapuni Community Centre. Also a big welcome to some of our hall users that are here today. This is only a very small representation of the large group and the large community that we are part of. Last year, we had over 3,518 usage hours. We had a big community attendance at our recent Awapuni Open Day, with an estimated 1,200 of the community present. Everything was free, such as bouncy castles, stir fry and sausage sizzle. The committee of the Awapuni Community Centre put this on as a thank you to our community for all their support over the years. It was so successful, in fact, that it will now become an annual event and will only get bigger and better. So as you can see, it is very well used. What I've come to tell you today is how much it is loved. However, the centre is almost 50 years old and we feel although it's functional, it's just lacking. The committee is in the process of giving the centre a revitalisation and making it look as loved as it is. We will be meeting with the urban design team on Monday. We have asked an artist to do murals on the 3 front exterior wall panels. We're working with Men's Shed. They have already installed a little library and we have asked them for bench seating. We've asked an artist to do some po and have a more welcoming entrance. We have a door on all 4 of the exterior walls and it's quite uncertain which is the main entrance. We will be setting up Wi-Fi in an outdoor room and would love some concrete paint on the footpath to show that it is a welcoming space for people to use that Wi-Fi. Linking in with the 10-year plan strategic directions goals 1 and 2, we believe e-vehicles need to be encouraged and we know this is the direction the world is going. We would absolutely love an outdoor charging port for e-cars and we know this is something that the City Council would support. We will be naming our rooms, which presently are called the large room and the small room. And we will display the pepeha of the community centre and we will be asking the kaumātua to bless these and possibly at the next open day. And all these requests are a result of community consultation. I'm proud to live in a city where we have so many people working together to improve our city for the benefit of the community. Thank you so much for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Rebecca. We have a couple of questions queuing up. So first up is Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Rebecca, and good to see you as well, Narelle. Just a couple questions. One, you talked about the, I think you used the word extremely unsafe playground conditions. Can you just give us a sense of what's needed in your view to correct that?
So the council officer that came to look at our playground called it a Little East playground. My background is actually early childhood education, so I would call that an under-twos playground. It was erected 8 years ago, and it's a kit set playground, so you can choose it, online, and then someone puts it together. And what has happened is the ladder for the Little East playground, it's almost 2 metres high, and it's completely vertical, made of metal poles. So a tiny little bit of moisture on it, it's quite slippery. I've seen the same kit set playground on Vogel Street. I think it might be a Samoan church, I'm not sure. And it's on a 45-degree angle, perfectly safe. There was an article on Stuff, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I can see a photo of the playground. They were talking about our playgroup we run out of there. And I can see the parent in the background hovering, which is what they do, and why I believe a child hasn't been injured yet.
Yeah, thank you for that. A further question, if I might. You refer to Te Wahana Wahi Tuma Tanui
Yes?
placemaking, and it's a term that I'm unfamiliar with. Could you just explain what that is?
That was in your strategic plan. That was the title.
Oh, that's the translation of the title in our plan coming
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Excellent. Thank you
That
for
was in your
clarifying
plan.
that.
So we're just linking in with what is already in the strategic plan, which is having that space for the community. We've already got the community there, and people already use it, but we just want it more functional and better and safer.
Great, thank you. That's clear, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Rebecca and Narelle. I note, and Councillor Barrett's mentioned one of them, but I note that you've got a few points where you think work needs to be done, and some other points where you think the centre could be improved.
Yes.
So just instead of looking at them point by point, I just want to try and take an overview of how confident you feel that you know what process or what person is in place for you to be able to address those needs as they arise, rather than having to, wait for an annual budget or a long-term plan to bring these needs to us.
I'll just jump in. So we have been in discussions with the council officers that support the community. So obviously in the past it was me, now my replacement. We're trying to engage in those spaces and feed things back in through the normal process from council. So we have been using the SnapSend Solve app. We've sent information through for some of the incidences to the call centre to manage into the right spaces as well. Some of the things that are on that list have been sent. Some of the things are things that have come up since, and we may not have sent them, and we've brought them into this forum first.
Some of the, if I could just add to that, some of the things on there, for example, the playground, we have been asking for the past 8 years.
When Annette was on council, she was part of that. When that was first built, and we complained at the time, and it's been reviewed, but nothing's ever changed.
We had a tree go down a couple of years ago now, and the Tree Works team removed the bulk of the tree, but the root is left there, and the root has come up, and there's very sharp, jagged branches and bits of root, and I've asked 3 times. I've rung and I've used SnapSend Solve and...
Yeah, so what that is saying to me is that you don't have a good process in place for getting the needs and requirements of the community centre dealt with.
I think the responses aren't happening, yes.
Okay. So, yeah. Thank you. I must say, it's the first I've heard about the playground, and I've been to meetings of the community centre committee, and it's my, the council committee that I chair is the one that deals with community centres, and it hasn't come to my committee. So there seems to be a gap, maybe, between...
we have had a council officer come out and look at it, and he agreed with me and understood. when a child gets to the top, there's actually nothing to grab onto, which is not part of learning to climb. It's, yeah, and he agreed, but he said that there was a funding.
Yeah, so I think, I better not get into comment or I'll get told off, but thank you for highlighting, by using that as an example, that we need to look at the process of how these things are dealt with.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Okay, in that case, thank you,
Thank you.
Rebecca and Norel and your team. I thank you all for the good work you are doing for the community, and I'm sure your submission will be discussed in the final deliberations later on. Thank you very much. So our next submitters are Janine Gribben and Bev Page.
Oh, hello, morena, Mr Chair, councillors, council officers. Lovely to be here. We're super excited. We're from the Awapuni community. I'm a business owner in Awapuni and very proud to be here today. Riverstop is, you've all read the submission, Riverstop's a little group of people. We take a lot of action and do lots of things with very little money. I'd like to highlight one of the things that we have done, which is our wee local history project that we did. It came out of a conversation around cups of coffee where we thought it would be really cool to just show the community parts of the history that we've had there over time in the shopping centre. So we did some really cute and innovative things, I think, anyhow. We got together and video stories, we've put up plaques, and we've used modern technology with QR codes, and you can come down and do a little trail and hear local people talking about what's happened over time in the village. So it's a really nice link with lots of different aspects. We store the information on the Manawatu Heritage site, and it's just as a way that people can engage in their built environment, which is really probably a little bit different than what's happening in some of the other areas. I think one of the things that I would like to highlight is that we are a unique village. We are the village that is closest to the river in Palmerston North, and it would be really cool if our village reflected some of that. We don't even have any signage there at the moment to say that the river's just down the road. As part of the Riverstop group, we have entered and engaged with council officers, and that's been a great process. The council officers are really, really supportive of what we do, but we would like to keep engaging with them, and we would really like to see more council officers, I guess, involved with us around developing the developing the village and our unique identity. I think that from our point of view, there are some unresolved issues with regards to work that started with the cycleways. That piece of work still hasn't been finished, so we'd really like to see a council officer back. But I think the point here is it needs to be taken as a much wider look at what we can do with the village there. There's things like the bus stop shelter and little pieces of work that haven't been finished from when the cycleway was put in. I'll stop talking now and I will hand over the rest of our time to Bev Page, who's going to talk more about one of the aspects that we are looking at developing.
Thank you very much for having me. I come here as a member of the Riverstop group, but also as a resident of the Awapuni area. And we got together, it was sort of an ad hoc thing, and then we formed the Riverstop committee. We've done, as Janine said, we've done quite a lot. But I'd like to talk about the library. Our wee library, I've become quite involved. I help out with the Christmas program, the holiday programs. And over my time there, I've realised that the library has outgrown itself. The space is just not big enough for what they do. Our library is one of the busiest in the Palmerston North area, in the City Council catchment. The staff have endeared themselves to the community, and I've never been in the library when there's not been a program going on or people in there. At one point in the school holiday program over Christmas, we had 120 people and mums and babies and children in a reading program, and it was chaos because everybody was there. You can't run a reading program when there's library customers as well, but we managed to do it and everybody enjoyed it. There's no areas for anyone to go to have a quiet discussion. There's no breakout areas. And the staff actually have their morning and afternoon tea in a cupboard, because I, as a program helper, I was in the cupboard having my coffee or my tea or whatever. So I would like to highlight the recommendation in our submission to make use of the St Mark's area, the church area, which is a green space in Awapuni, which is becoming more and more rare as far as being able to build. There's no building sites to put the library somewhere else. The St Mark's area opens up to be the perfect spot for a library and community centre. It offers the inside area and also the outside space. There's a car park there at the moment, which is underutilised. And as you know, car parking in our Awapuni little shopping centre is diabolical. I spoke to the library staff yesterday and they had their Thursday morning community group, but people have to get dropped off. It's a lot of elderly people come to this community group. They have to be dropped off by family because there's no parks and they have to stagger in. Even they run a book club, and we have a lot of people who now choose to walk to the book club. Again, it's catering for the older population. I go and collect a few people from time to bring them to the book club because they won't drive their cars because there's no parking. We've been through that, Janine highlighted that. So my role here today is just to promote the recommendation for the new library community hub in our area. I believe there's other submissions that are going to pick up on that new library concept. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Any questions?
We probably have one question for you, ladies. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Janine and Bev. Really enjoyed reading your submission, especially the reference to Awapuni Village with a capital A and capital V. That was excellent. Wanted to, I guess, probe a little bit around, Janine, your comments around things unfinished and gaps, and just to really understand, is that an issue around pace, or is things just sort of totally disconnected in terms of your ability to engage with our staff to address things?
I wouldn't say totally disconnected, but I'd say there's a huge gap. At the time that the cycleway was put through, we made a submission.
Yes.
I think it was one of the largest submissions the council had ever had. Weren't listened to. Excellent. And at that time, we highlighted that that was an opportunity to actually take a breath and have a look and see what we could actually achieve there. And we came up with various ideas. They were never really explored. They were never really looked at. I think we all woke up one day not so long ago, maybe, probably just from memory, thinking maybe 2 or 3 months ago, to find great big red lines painted, great big stops, great big bollardy poles that just get run over by people. We're really not sure what they're there to achieve or why they were put there. And so I think what it is that I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve, And I think there's a really good opportunity. When you look at your creative and livable cities strategy, you're trying to achieve really great things, and we're painting red lines on roads rather than actually looking at a village that could be something that's really spectacular. And it's a really cool place. I've lived in a lot of places, and Awapuni's the best.
Thank you for that. Further query, if I might. You talk about a policy to, I guess, help us prioritize around public art and sculpture, et cetera. I assume that inherent in that policy would be some expectations around distribution in the city and ensuring that villages get their fair amount, perhaps, of art.
Yeah, I think that it would be lovely to see art in the villages. I actually have a background, I have a master's in creative arts development, and so I know how important public art is and what that can achieve and what that can achieve for greater public out, for greater community outcomes. So I'd love to see lots more of it all around, not just in Awapuni, but all around.
Thank you. Thank you both, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Janine and Bev, and I'm sure your submission will be discussed in the final deliberations. Thank you very much. So our next submitter is Simon Barnett.
Well, good morning. Simon Barnett is my name. You saw me yesterday. Thank you for your time yesterday in the Sculpture Trust. I'm here today not as a part of a group, but as an individual, as a deeply committed member of this community for a long time, being brought up in this town, had a wide range of experience. And during that time, I've had a lot of input into, I was trying to think when I was sitting there, how long, almost as a 20-something-year-old, inputs into economic development. And it's that I'd like to really talk to you about today, and I'd like to talk very briefly and then leave time for questions, because mine is essentially a questioning submission and pointing out some points that I think you guys as city leaders need to be thinking about and asking some hard questions around. Just to give you a little bit of background, and I'm saying this not to tell you how smart I am, but I've been involved in Massey University teaching marketing, business, strategy development for many years, partly as a full-time, then as a part-time teacher. During that time I developed and founded OBO, which is a world-leading company in sports protection, and we export to 70 countries, have a 70% market share in our chosen niche. And the success of that company is mainly, I think, based on the fact that we've been very clear about our strategic direction. We've reinforced that strategic direction consistently and very deliberately over that long period. And so then when I look at the development of the plan here, and during this time that I've referred to most of my life, I've seen words said and then very little delivered in terms of things that are going to address those words. So in this case, and this is in my submission, so I'm not going to go on about it much, but small city ambition, small city benefits, big city ambition, got to get that right, is actually very suitable for here. Some of you may remember that I was the co-chair of Young Heart Easy Living, which I thought was actually also a good, of course better. No, this one's very good. But at the moment, what I see is there's no work that I can see, and certainly not reflected in this plan, that's been explored to actually find out what those words mean. And if you don't know what something means, of course you can't backfill it in terms of delivery of resources. Likewise, when I look at the point of difference and strength, which is a phrase out of the consultation document here, that's fine, and I think that's very good to talk about it, and food innovation is mentioned once or maybe twice in this document. A focus on the distribution hub being for the Manawatu. Those two things of economic pillars to build on make a great deal of sense to me. That said, then when I look at the plan, I could read this plan and actually remove those words of big city ambition, small city benefits, and those two pillars of distribution and food innovation, and the rest of the plan would stand onto itself. Now, that should not be the case. If there was a clear linkage between the strategic direction that is being envisaged and the allocation of resources, I would see it woven in here much more deeply than I do. So I'm a very positive person. I'm sorry to arrive here and tell you that I think this is lacking, but I do, and I think your job as leaders of the city is to question this and to drive it more deeply, because I want my children and my grandchildren to have this town as a much more thriving environment, and a lot of what is done here is very good, and it is a thriving place, and we've managed to get through COVID probably better than anywhere else in the country. But in 20 years' time, this place needs to be I would like it to be a little bit different. I would like it to have a higher level of income than it has. We're actually below average income in this town, not above it. Now that we can achieve, particularly on the basis of food innovation, and we've got the basics of that, but again, to my mind, not enough linkage in delivery. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions because I understand these are this is a point of view which may need some teasing out.
Thank you, Simon. We do have some questions. And first up is Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Simon, for once again coming in and sharing your perspective, and obviously appreciate the expertise you have in this area. Just to tease out what you're saying a little bit more, you've put in your submission, you feel that the beyond laudable but vague goals. So in terms of the 5 goals that we've outlined in the plan, do you feel that there's a link between the goals and what we have incorporated? And if you think that the goals are vague, have you got any suggestion of how we can make them less vague?
The goals you're referring to are an innovative, growing city, a creative and exciting city, a connected, safe city and eco-city. Well, I don't actually see any direct linkage there between small city benefits and big city ambition. And I think you could say every city in the country could list these things, and they would probably all do so. But that doesn't create a point of difference for this town. And if we are talking about economic development, then I think we should be able to say, okay, so this makes sense to me now. We're heading in this direction uniquely, not the same as everybody else, and therefore we're allocating resources differently than everybody else in a series of subtle ways. For example, and I'm not trying to, because this is a big job and I haven't done the work, I would imagine, and I haven't seen this and I could be wrong, and I'm more than happy to be corrected, but there should be a very clear direction to CEDA to say your main focus is actually developing food innovation, and we'd like to see 2/3 of your budget allocated to food innovation, growing that as a strategic strength in the city over the next 15 years. Now, to my knowledge, and I've read their annual report and I've read their strategic plans, there is not that direction coming, or not that execution coming through in what they are publishing, nor in their actions. Not to say that they're not doing anything in those areas, but it's not enough if you want to transform this place from being what we are to something different.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Appreciate that.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Simon, for bringing us this opportunity to think about where we're going. So just wanted to pick up, you talked about the 2 pillars, as you've referred, the logistics distribution and the food innovation. On the logistics side, I think we've got something in excess of $100 million set around our integrated transport initiative, which is largely that ring road, but that also transforms how transport happens in the city center by getting some of the heavy traffic out. So that's a pretty decent chunk of investment there from my perspective. Food HQ, similar levels of investment. We're hoping that others will pay quite a bit of that. So I guess I'm trying to reflect what I see in the plan, I suppose, and then see where you're coming from on that. So I guess I see quite substantial investment in both of those pillars. And I guess what I'm trying to understand from you then is, are you concerned about that level of investment, or is it more that we need that lens to then translate out across what we're doing in community development, or what we're doing in the libraries, or what we're doing in any other aspect of endeavour?
I think it does need to be spread out more broadly, and it needs to be talked more about. To my memory, in here it talks about those investments, and I think the investment in Food HQ and food generally is very low, so that does need increasing, and it probably needs taking money out of things and putting into there quite deliberately, which is why I say CEDA could spend most of their effort and most of their money into that area. But it also needs to be talked about. Now, I don't know how often around this table, and I haven't, to be honest, heard it from you guys, and I haven't heard it from the mayor significantly, and I haven't heard it from the city management significantly, that these are the things that we're hanging our hats on. So it needs to be talked about, it needs to be followed through in every sense of what you're doing, because that's what, in the long term, what leadership differentiates between normally other companies, but sometimes other countries. Because countries, say like Denmark, don't grow to be positioned they're in without a lot of discussion and strong leadership. 300 years ago, the King of Denmark said, we can't make money selling food to each other. We have to add beauty to everything we do. Now, that simple comment 300 years ago has channeled effort and energy and resources down the path of adding beauty to everything they do in their economy. So from starting with you guys through to the instructions to the council, management, and what they do and what they say needs to be more direct and more amplified, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Although we run out of time, but we have still some councillor questions, so I'll ask Councillor Beattie to ask a quick question.
No, I'm fine. Mine was, you've
Okay.
answered.
Thank you. Thank you then, Simon. Thank you for your submission, and I'm sure it will be taken into account during the final deliberations.
Thank you for the opportunity, and if in another forum you wanted me to talk more directly about these things, I'm more than happy to do so, because I believe these are very important topics. So thank you. All the best.
Thank you. And our next submitter is David Chappell, and I believe he has a presentation as well. Welcome, David, and
I'm Reverend Amy Hoban. I'm the Vicar of St Matthews, and I'm here simply to support David, who will be offering the presentation
welcome.
today.
And I guess you understand the lighting system, the traffic lighting?
Yes, thank you.
The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm here this morning with Amy as a warden of St Matthew's Church. And we are here as part also of the Riverstop community, been part from the beginning of this development of this interesting community aspect. The project that we're here to talk about is to provide a community gathering area in Riverstop as part of the community. And it's on the illustration of the slide up there, which was part of the submission. And initially what I must say is that since making my submission on behalf of the church, we've had some really good feedback from council officers as to indications of sources of funding, so that whereas I talked of funding before, it looks like there may be some ways that we can fund this. The right-of-way that's there on the plan connects a large area of from Rugby Street and Ferguson Street through to the shopping centre. And so the park is at the sort of intersection and the strategic point with the pedestrian crossing linking it to the shopping centre, the library and everything else that happens there. So this is apart from the St Mark's land, this is the last piece of green space in the area, and we want to preserve that. But at the same time, we want to provide a place for people to sit, have lunch, and meet in the community. We have a community pantry ready to go there, and we envisage a picnic table and seating so that people can linger and meet and talk. We have 3 takeaway areas in the shops in the shopping centre, but there's nowhere for anybody to sit and have their lunch. The church further down the site has a couple of seats, and it's very rare to see them not being used by people sitting and just watching the world go by. The second point I want to make this morning is that's the view of the site from the road, and the piece at the top is the right-of-way that goes through to Rugby Street. And I just want to talk for a minute about the right-of-way because it's not good. I'm sure that none of you have actually used it, but But a lot of the community use this to come through, walk across the crossing to the shopping centre. That's a view of it. I did take some other slides, but that's it there. It suffers because the trees on the neighbouring properties, the roots, and you can see there's a crack in the pavement there. It's terribly uneven. The leaves are really bad. There's usually graffiti. It suffers because it has a dog leg in it. And when we talk of a safe and livable and connected community, this is probably the opposite, in my opinion. That's something we've got to live with, but I'm sure we could make it more interesting and make it more attractive. And I think it needs some serious work done to it. Up in there, that's at the corner where you see right at the end there where, surprisingly, yesterday when I took those photographs, there was 2 council things there with PNCC on, so I'm not sure if something's happening already, but they were there. Above there, in the trees, is the street light. Gives a wonderful view of the leaves and the trees, but not much light on the pavement down below. It really is a very sad place. It usually is graffiti. The board on the left was an effort by the church to have intentional graffiti, and that was good for a while, but as people move on and other things change, it's not used. So I'm sort of asking that some serious investigations be made as to the making this access way, which is a prime thing. It seems something that the city did in the 50s and 60s. It made these connections, but we haven't actually kept up with them, and they haven't been made to the sort of place that people would want to go. I certainly wouldn't send my grandchild through there to go and get a bottle of milk. So, we're also part of the Awapuni community, as I mentioned, and I would like to just endorse those points about the traffic and the parking. We felt we played a large part in the consultation about the parking in the village, and although I realise there's not enough as there could be, I think the solution is a good compromise. But I do stress also the fact that most of the bus stops around our area used to have a shelter, and those shelters are gone, and they haven't come back. And I believe they should do. I don't see how you can expect people to use a bus in this sort of weather if they can't stand in a shelter. I know it's difficult because the place where they were has been taken away. The last message I had was that they were looking at cantilevered type of shelters, and I guess they are expensive, and it's probably the reason they haven't come back. But I do think we need to do something about it. So that's my submission. Happy to,
Thank you, David. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, David and Amy. David, sorry, I struggle to understand the last bit that you were saying about the bus shelters there. Could you just repeat some of that? You said that they'd been taken away, and then what were you saying about why they were not replaced?
Well, the bus shelters were situated where the indented bus parking is now. So there was no place for the bus shelter when the road was extended into that berm area.
But then you commented about something that could be used. Sorry, I just had difficulty making out what you were saying. So you commented about something that could be put in as a bus shelter?
Well, I did hear that when I did ask the officers about this some time ago, more than 12 months ago, they said, we're looking at some cantilevered type structures, so we don't need so much ground to put them in. Right. But nothing's happened.
Right, okay. I think that was the bit I missed. Thank you for clarifying.
I probably didn't explain it very well.
No, it's right. Well, probably you understood it and I didn't, so that was okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, David and Amy, for presentation. David, just wanted to pick up on your first point, your first slide there, where you talked about this concept for the community area there, and you said that recent communications with officers sort of had you feeling optimistic that there might be some funding around that. I just wondered if you could perhaps amplify that a little bit in terms of, is there anything known around amounts, likelihood, in that this is our sort of chance to address things through our long-term plan budget? I just want to know what your view is around the financial needs here.
Well, I don't have a cost for it, unfortunately. I haven't been able to get that, but my guess is it's something in the order of 10 to 20,000, dollars would cover it all. So I've been talking with I guess it's the placemaking people in the council, and they've been enthusiastically supporting us in this goal. And rather than coming to the council and saying, can you fund this, they've suggested that we go to some external sources, and they've given me some indications of where I should address the inquiry. So we're going to process that.
Great, thank you. I wish you well with that.
Well, we hope so too.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David and Amy, for your submission, and
Yep.
I'm sure it will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So our next submitters are Annette Nixon and Peter Thompson.
Good morning. My name's Peter Thompson. I think I'm here because I am the former parish clerk of the conglomeration of churches that you see in front of you. Just to explain the position, the St Andrew's Church, which was a separate Presbyterian church, and the St Mark's Church in Awapuni amalgamated some years ago and became the parish of St Mark's, St Andrews. And there was then a further amalgamation of the St David's Church, which is in the Terrace End area, to form the Presbyterian New Church. So we are effectively one church formed out of three previous churches. That explains the statement in our submission of 2019 parish of St David's, St Mark's and St Andrews combined to create a new parish. Reverend Susan Blakey was our minister. The parish organisation with 3 earthquake-prone worship buildings has meant that we have to worship now at the Litchway in Roy Street, and we meet there in the normal sort of way with Zoom services, and obviously people attend the Litchway service on Sundays. The PNC Awapuni has one building strengthened and uses a community resource. That building also has the church office in the building itself, an op shop in the small shed type of construction adjoining the church, and ample off-street parks. But the issue which has been referred to in brief in other submissions is that we do have a lot of land in that parking area which we see as being a possible community resource. There were suggestions years ago that the library should move onto that site. Annette may talk to that in greater detail. We have a St Andrew's Church, of course, in the city. That has been subject to earthquake requisition for some years now. I'm pleased to advise the council that that has now been resolved. Council has approved the building consent. There have been other approvals, and we have received complete approval to redo St Andrew's Church in the city, which will enable us to effectively have 3 local community outreach centres. That obviously is going to allow us to spread our activities throughout the whole city. There'll be different activities for the Awapuni area, the city area, and the Terrace End area, which gives us a potential that Annette is going to speak on.
Right, well, morena everyone. Our submission addresses the Connected Communities Plan, and can I say that receiving the booklets was a great delight, and they were very easy to go through. So in here, in the Connected Communities booklet, there is reference on page 10 to at the last 10-year plan hearing that Peter and I were here, and that we requested council to consider taking on the church property in Awapuni for continued community use, and the fact that the location was close to the shops and library. And some of you have heard the background to this, how the Awesome Awapuni group, which was very active in the village, and those activities have largely been taken on now by the community library and by the Riverstop village, Awapuni village group, that they had previously, over the last 3 years, talked about the opportunity for what was needed in Awapuni. The Presbyterian New Church has now decided there will be no further development of buildings at Awapuni, and it is quite likely that the land will be surplus to any church requirement, and would be much better placed really as a community facility. So there is now, this is the 4th opportunity that we've had to keep you informed and to continue with this opportunity. Since the last 10-year plan, David, in the role of city planner, has been down and talked with us. We also had Debbie Duncan come and visit and look at what we were talking about, and Joe Ransom and Narelle came as well. So we really appreciate that ongoing oversight by the council to keep this as something which isn't that we're asking for any money immediately or anything like that. You have the luxury of long-term planning. So this next year, the Presbyterian combined parishes will be concentrating on the re-establishment, the re-strengthening, the reopening of St Andrew's Parish, no doubt with a new name as we've come together collectively. So I'm not quite sure what it'll be called, but it'll probably take years for the city to stop calling it St Andrew's, in the same way that no one's given up calling St Mark's St Mark's. So that will be a priority, and our minister has just resigned due to ill health, and so we will also be putting a lot of energy into the direction of finding a replacement for her. So that's the situation in Awapuni, and just reiterating that our interest is in having the council continue to consider the use of that land for community purposes, and as Bev commented, especially to replace a library that the village and wider community has outgrown. I note in this document the proposed Kiki Whenua residential area, which is part of that Kaka Tangiata growth area, and also the fact that that high-level planning for community facilities is an essential part of what happens in the future. And as with libraries, there's no policy guiding council's response to such community requests, so we would urge you to include us in your consultation for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette and Peter. There is a long queue of questions, but I might start with one of my own. You said, thanks for your offer. You said we are not asking for any money immediately. Will there be any demand afterwards?
We're not in a position, the property is owned by the Presbyterian Property Trust, and so we're not in a position to be able to donate it to the city, as much as I think that would be a lovely thing to be able to do.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Annette and Peter. As you'll be aware, after the last 10-year plan, the offer of the use of St Mark's was referred for a report, and then I believe it has become part of the wider piece of work concerning library and community hubs across the city, which we're still waiting to hear back from. There have been, I believe, negotiations with officers and yourselves. Can you confirm that has there been any recent contact?
Not recently, but COVID got in the way of that. Yeah. And so we've just appreciated that people who were needing to talk about it and know about it have actually been to have a look.
So you haven't had any recent contact about it? No. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you both. Just in regards to the land, you mentioned about if there was some sort of transaction, we'd need to negotiate with the Presbyterian Property Trust. And have they given some indications to you that there'd be an openness and willingness for a community purchase?
I don't think it's gone as far as that. We wouldn't have probably approached them formally unless there was a definite approach from council.
Okay,
would be my thought on that.
Respect that. Thank you, Chair.
I'm afraid we have to leave it here because we run out of time. Thank you both once again for your submission, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very happy to respond to any emails or other comment.
Thank you, Annette. And the next submission is from the Manawatu Multicultural Council, Christine Mukabulinda.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Kei te mihi mō ngā tipuna o te iwi o Rangitāne. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No, ni hau, namaste, ola, and talofa. We represent the Manawatu multiculture, and we thank you for the opportunity and the inclusion of the contribution we make to your 10-year plan. As you're aware, MMC has been operating as part of your wider family in celebrating, supporting and connecting our multicultural communities in the Manawatu. Our MMC consists of 50 ethnic group members, which our submission has been made, tailored and shared amongst our groups to contribute to this plan. And I appreciate that we only have a short time frame in which we can present, so we will raise 3 points to the current drafts that you have. We make reference to the the statistics that you make of 12,000 more jobs in the year 2031. In this, we raised some of our concerns and we asked to take into account when making the innovative and growing city strategic draft that things such as workforce participation are high focus for our organisations and our people. Skilled migrants need to be included in this plan. We ask that addressing the difficulties our skilled migrants face in finding appropriate employment, properly developed, consulted and comprehensive employment action plans for skilled migrants need to be created. In our creative and exciting city strategy, we ask to develop a sense of belonging. In the Safe Community Strategic Direction, the adoption of a local plan targeting racism, discrimination would strengthen the cultural identity of the multicultural communities in the city. And as it is known, the racism and discrimination leads to inequality and social exclusion. Through this, we would like to see some education in schools. We believe that the multicultural communities need more visibility and encouragement to keep their cultural identity, and more needs to be done to strengthen community capability of cultural diversity, considering that cultural and ethnic communities groups face obstacles to support and encourage the maintenance of their heritage language and own culture. Some local council action to support inclusiveness in school environment also needs to be taken into consideration to increase the cultural awareness by the wider community. We propose aligning with the PNCC vision for the city with big ambitions, the formation of a multicultural building that would allow communities and ethnic groups to use the space for cultural education purposes. With an increase of diversity in our city, and related increase of services that need for MMC to deliver those services will require increased funding. We need more resources to keep doing what we do really well. We thank you for the opportunity to the Chair, the members, the staff of Palmerston North City Council in contributing to the 10-year plan.
Thank you, team. We have at least one question at the moment. Councillor Johnson.
I've actually got two questions, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me.
You're welcome.
The first one, thank you for your submission. The first one is around the need for a building to house multicultural organisations. Have you got any, specs around that in terms of size, number of rooms, requirements? You know, how far through thinking through this have you got with your understanding of what's needed, I guess?
I'll start and then I'm going to hand it over to Maria, who's done a lot more work. We currently utilise the community building in King Street, which you will see that we constantly are using it 7 days a week and run into the evening. I will hand it over to Maria, who's done a lot more research behind this as well, please.
You've got a green light, you're good.
Thank you for the opportunity. So yes, we have think about this because what we note, again, saying, to encourage people to keep the language, keep their own culture. They are very small groups, so they don't have much funding, so they cannot hide in a place. So like Palmeirinhos, like I said, the Fijian, the active community, so we are using MMC, so we are using even Sunday and Saturdays because the demand, and we have just one room. So we are trying to increase the number of the staff as well because we are quite short and we have a lot of work. So we just have basically two places to put staff. And so we need more rooms for the classes, more room for the events, because normally you use downstairs, and we need to hide downstairs, so we are paying for the utilize the other rooms in the building. So yes, I think at least we need room for staff and room for the community.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is just about resourcing. So at the moment, I assume that your resourcing from council comes through the strategic priority grant. And that will be reviewed, I guess the reapplications for that are in October this year. So I assume that you'll be putting in a request for increased funding at that time. Is there additional resourcing on top of that that you were looking for?
Yeah, yes, we need more resources. As you can see, the city is growing, diversity is growing. Any activity we have has grown so bigger than it used to be 20 years ago. So we need more funding, certainly. We need more bigger building than what we have now. Our celebration grown so big, even a simple potluck dinner will end up with 150 people. We always have to find places in the city to accommodate that. So we really need more resources. Our staff are underpaid. That's absolutely shocking to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. In your submission, you mentioned the multicultural passport to play, and you've identified reserve space and the sort of different levels of service. So you're talking about themed gardens and different types of gardens. Where would you see these being put, or where do you see the gaps with the reserves that we've got now?
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to be part of the Passport to Play multicultural edition last year. And when we did the brainstorm, it was quite hard to find multicultural places. So it was quite interesting. So one example, I always mention the Brazilian group because it's the group that I'm quite close. So one example is like we plant one tree in the Ahimat Park, and that became our little space. So when we refer, let's go to our park, so it's the sense of belonging that increase. Like Hamilton, they have a beautiful multicultural park. So people go and they feel part of the city. So when you meet someone, when you're traveling overseas, when you meet someone, they say, oh, I have been to New Zealand. It's a straight bonding that you create. So I think if we create spaces that we can identify ourselves, I think it'll be easy to be part of the city. So yeah, I think we already have many plans to create new space. So just incorporate new things. So don't change the plan, just incorporate. Like even a mural or a garden, like we have seen so many places like Chinese garden, Japanese garden, so, and we don't have this kind of things here. And even like a little tree that you plant and it's belong to your culture, it's very valid.
No, thank you. That answers the question.
Thank you. We still have time for one quick question from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the submission. Just wanted to pick up on your main point there around education in response to racism and discrimination, and you identified schools as a preferred outlet for that. Council has, I guess, limited ability in terms of what goes on in schools. Are you suggesting it be limited to schools, or you just see that that's one of a number of options that we might think about?
We look to the starting point within schools and then moving out to the wider communities as well.
Okay, great. And because it's still flashing, there was a note about asking for tours to the Resource Recovery Center in Awapuni. And just wanted to understand, so have you made requests and they've been declined, or I'm just trying to understand why the opportunity for tour hasn't happened?
I'll be quick.
Thank you.
So they have a beautiful place there. They have the educational place. But our problem is transportation. We don't have funding to put these people in a place and take them there. So people from the resource center, they are wonderful, and they have beautiful place to handle educational program, but we face this problem like transportation and how we'll take the people there.
Thanks for clarifying. That's appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your forbearance.
Thank you, team from MMC. Appreciate your time, and your submission will be discussed in the final deliberations. Thank you very much. So next submission is a group of submissions presented by Angel Kawan.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Angel. I actually represent two main groups here. So Catherine, by me, Catherine Richardson. We are from Manawatu Chinese Association, so Ni Hao, and also Cantonese Lei Hou. So I say two main groups because I think from your information you got information from 4 groups. So one is, the big part is from Chinese community. So we collect 31 Chinese in our community to voice their idea to the city council. And the other one is from Palmerston North Tai Chi group, mainly elderly, and 11 completed form, mainly from the non-Chinese local elderly. And then the other one is from another group, Global Parent Support. 5 of us from our committee also raised their voice to City Council. And the last one, they're so cute, they are children. Yeah, it's from the learning group from MMC, so which is running in the morning of Saturday. So the children, they are aged from 8 to 11. They also have some awesome idea to you all. So focus on the main group from Chinese community. We got 31 people to say their idea. So you can see the survey, we have a survey. But why we have this survey? Because from the after the first day, we translate the consultation, the main 5 areas to Chinese group in Chinese version, and then we got these all points from several Chinese, and then we find, there's a very good opportunity to help to engage our Chinese community to say their voices. So we hope this research can help more Chinese to say more as a tool. So we give a lot of blank area, hope they can say more other than the points here. And from the percentage, you can see some very high area they really concern from their angle. So the first one, yeah, maybe.
So I think what we're trying to say is this is the first time we really try to help the council engage with our community, because in the past, Chinese people tend to be quite quiet, or the ethnic community. So we try to translate some of the highlight in their own language, then we can engage with them. So it's funny, Angel found out the first overnight, we sent out council have the 10 years plan, do you want to have your say? And then they just all come back straight away through social media, through the Facebook and the Chinese WeChat. So in here, what I know always that citizens more focused on the lower level action or day-to-day relate to them, but hopefully we can help you to slot it in under the Council 5 goals, under your strategic plan. So later on, when you develop all this plan, can engage more with us, we help you to reach out to the community and feedback to the council. So I think what we're trying to say is nothing specific we request, but mostly public safety, environment, recycling, even the children, they said we have more security camera. If you look through all our feedback, yeah. But there's a balance in it. So if anything the council want to engage in the future, you can use us, yeah. And we just have some community talk like public safety with the police and the health talk, we translate into different languages. So just recently happened. So this is a start from us because we got some support from the DIA for the COVID funding, cohesion project. So hopefully there are more things happening, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can highlight some point. So the first one is about the traffic jam in the square. So after the footpaths was expanded, so crazy traffic all the time over there, so the percentage is pretty high, it's 73.1%. And then the next page is also pretty high too. It's about safety in our neighborhood. So we would like City Council continue to support neighborhood support. So, and then...
Thank you, Angela. I guess your written submission is considered as read.
Okay, that's good.
Are you happy to take some questions?
Yes.
So we have a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Catherine and Angel. I was going to ask you to talk to us a bit more about the feelings of safety, because I think that did come across quite clearly in your survey that people were not feeling that safe in a number of different environments, and also not feeling that there was much neighbourhood support group to help them feel safe. So are you able to elaborate a bit on that? Is that something that's a recent change, do you think, to how people are feeling? Or has there always been that feeling of not feeling safe?
I think this area, we actually, from WeChat, after I posed the consultation, there was a bit hit there.
The debate.
Yes, right. So some people say about racism, this kind of thing. But some people say not really. So actually in the last year, from what I collect, some racism situation definitely happened in Chinese community because of the COVID. So it's kind of racism thing, but if talking about the safety, we haven't really collect any about unsafety situation. But in overall, I can see the neighborhood is very important for us.
What, sorry?
Neighborhood, good labor support.
General neighborhood support.
Actually, the neighborhood support,
the race, regardless who you are, I think in general, if the council can create more neighborhood support, so will be good.
Yeah, that was quite a high percentage.
Good, yeah. And then I think I always had my heart on elderly. So elderly, they always isolated in the house. Because in COVID, actually, we engaged with our own community and also the Tai Chi group, but they are the European community as well. So we identify any high needs elderly. So we coming back with Jeremy, we arrange all the delivery for them. So which make us started like we should engage more with elderly to see what their needs. But also with the Chinese community, of course, it's the language. They don't know what they can get help from the council or from the central government. So we need to engage with them, outreach with them, see what they need, and we can help them. I think.
Good thing is we have the police, Qin.
Yeah, there's a queue.
The
Chinese police,
Yes, right. So like this coming Wednesday, he is invited to have a talk to us about safety, personal safety, and also family safety. So it is what MCA, Chinese Association, can do.
Thank you so much for doing this survey and doing the translation and bringing this back to us, because I think this is the first time I remember we've had submission like this.
That's always hopefully is the start. If you guys have anything, not huge document, like if you just highlight questionnaire, you want to translate it, and then we can provide to the community, then we can,
Yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for coming in. And you've actually partially answered the question I had for you, and that is around the police have actually got Sergeant Q, who is now the new Ethnic Communities Liaison Officer for Central District. So he's coming to see you to talk about, I suppose, community safety. And I suppose the only other, and I am commenting, I can phrase it as a question if you like, but he obviously will be able to lead you into the neighbourhood support groups and things like that to make sure that
that would be good.
We have better cohesion in that respect.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. A couple of points. One you've touched on already is racism. Have you found it increasing since COVID? You talked about it during COVID. You picked up a bit of racism. But since COVID, how have you found it? Is it dwindled back, or is it still there, or is it getting worse?
I think last year, at the beginning of COVID, yeah, we heard some cases pretty serious, like parent, not children, parent in the park. She was told to go home. Yeah, go back to your country. This kind of thing, yeah. So, and also happening a little bit in the school. Yes, right. Among the children, and also a little bit from the teacher. That's what we heard
From the teacher?
Yes, yes, that's what we heard last year. But since I think end of last year until now is pretty okay. I can sense it, and I haven't heard any.
And the other thing is, I was reading through your submission, you're concerned about drugs and alcohol with young people. Could you elaborate a bit more on that, please?
This from the opinion from some group of people. I think we have seen the youth, the parents, they complain. The youth always face to the screen and also kind of nothing to do other than that. Sure, some kids are very, very good in academic and also sports, but many kids, they are still stuck at home. And then maybe they meet some friend, they are pretty like drinking and or drug thing, they will go that way. So we see, this kind of problem around, and sometimes like the very hot spots, is it Union Street, the Ada Street, this area?
Yep.
Yeah, so we can see drink bottle around, some screaming at night. So this is what our community can see about the safety and also about the concern about the youth.
Can I add something? I know we got the youth space in the common hall. That is great. Some of our consultation were saying people should utilize more other avenues like Te Manawa or Arts Gallery for the youth. I just recently, in Chinese Association, we have one group of parents, European parents, approach us to have a party, and off guard, I let it happen. And then drinking happening in there. And they said, they're 16, and then I think we shouldn't have children like around the age, but I think they start drinking. So as a community, we should think about, and after I got 10 inquiries for booking for 16, 18, 21 birthday party. And I screened them all, and I said, no, we're not doing any party like that, because for the whole Chinese Association Hall. So I think as a community, maybe we need to look into like, give some space for children, not for them, have a space for them, have a party, but in a safe environment, not taking drugs and alcohol. But at the moment, all the parents have nowhere to let the children have a party. So let's say 5 years old, they can go to Lollipop or whatever, but teenager, when they want a party, they have nowhere to go. But how you manage that is the part of growing up. So I think maybe we should look into that as a community, how to like engage the younger generation to do the right thing in the evening. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine and Angel, for your submission.
Thank you so much.
It will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank
you very much once again. So we'll have one more submission, councillors, before we go to the break. So our next submitter is Bruce Lockett. Welcome, Bruce. I guess you might have seen the traffic light system. The green light gives you 7 minutes, and the yellow is 2 minutes, and when it comes to the red, you have 1 minute left in your time. And if you want the councillors to ask some questions, so you may give some time to...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, so thank you very much. I feel privileged to be able to speak to you today, and I didn't expect to have this opportunity. I thought I'd missed my flip. I'm not familiar with council procedures, so thank you very much. And I've thrown this PowerPoint presentation together at very short notice, so I hope it goes all right. And this is probably going to give me control. Now, anyone who owns a home knows that your 3 waters cost you an awful lot of money. They're always hidden, they're in the walls, they're under the ground, you dig a lot of trenches, you spend a lot of money and you see nothing for your efforts. And the city's no different. And you are now faced with the biggest decision a Palmerston North City Council will have to make or has ever made. A huge amount of money has to be spent on our infrastructure due to past lack of investment. And it's likely a thankless job, so I'm pleased I'm not in your shoes. So the best practicable option solutions so far seem to have come down to three options, really: discharge to land, discharge to sea, or discharge to the river. And for cultural reasons and for the welfare of the river itself in pollution terms, the discharge to the river seems to have fallen off the map and is not popular, which leaves us with really two options. And really I'm here today to talk to you about discharge to land and my concerns about discharge to land. And as the proposal stands, as far as I can see, it requires slightly enhanced treatment, which is great. It requires an 11-kilometre pipeline with a centre pivot irrigation system that requires flat land. It's going to take about 1,740 hectares, supposedly of inland fluvial soils, with the production of cut and carry crops as a potential offset. Now, there is really only one area within an 11-kilometre radius of the wastewater plant which is suitable, which is west of the city, over towards the Orua River. I'll mark that on the map there. And you can see that's about the same size as Palmerston North Metropolitan Area, so this is a huge amount of land. I feel there are significant issues here. This is an unsuitable soil type for this sort of wastewater management. There is a high risk of flood every 5 to 10 years. The entire program is experimental in size and nature. The proposed income from cash and carry crops, is at risk, and there's a possibility of lasting damage to the irrigated areas. It has an unknown lifespan, and it is not scalable to include the regional and sub-regional communities, and ultimately it leads to loss of prime Class 2 arable land with a probable annual income of $20 million coming off that land being lost. The only better land around Palmerston North is Class 1 land at Kuatia, which is at too high an altitude to produce food crops. So this is very valuable land. This is a land care soil map, and it shows that the area in question is what's called recent gley, which is a clay loam. The yellow area around the Manawatu River is your fluvial soils, and that is not being considered, I wouldn't think. It's also too small. And the lighter blue is the also a gley soil. An article in 2005 in the Journal of Environmental Quality looked at 4 different soil types, one of which was a gley soil and for use in waste management. And they found that recent gley was the worst of the 4 soil types and led to significant nitrate and phosphate leaching. Flood risk. This is the flood risk plan from the soil mapper, and you can see that it's red, which means it's going to get a severe flood every 5 to 10 years. And I'm not sure that putting a major infrastructure like this in a major flood risk area is a good idea. By your own admission, this is experimental. 1,740 hectares, making it by far the biggest land discharge in New Zealand. The income from cash and carry is at risk. It might sound great on paper, but you need to know that there's an absolute prohibition for accepting milk or milk from land that has had human effluent applied to it. The dairy companies just won't accept it. And forestry cropping would seem that it's no longer viable. Whakareroa Forest in Rotorua, they've stopped doing that now. So, and they've gone to a land contact system instead. And at the end of the 35 years or 30 years or whenever the system stops or the consent finishes, what then happens to the land. And I suspect that there would be irrevocable damage to the land, possibly by emerging organic contaminants, which are in sewage, and this is from your own documentation, synthetic or naturally occurring chemicals that accumulate in the environment and cause potential adverse ecological and human health effects. Also, just the damage from having effluent applied to the land. This is an unknown lifetime. When Rotorua City Council put in place their Whakarewa effluent discharge plan, they thought it was going to last a long time, but it is no longer suitable, sustainable for several reasons, including cultural reasons. It also results in ground saturation which is detrimental to trees, making it an unreliable filtering system, which is why they've had to stop using it. So we don't know how long we can keep going with a land effluent system. And the loss of adjacent high-quality arable land. It doesn't make sense to me to take out 1,700 hectares of land close to Palmerston North. We should be making sure that we protect that land, and from your own environmental sustainability review in 2020, the eco-strategy states increasing biodiversity and protecting our high-class soils, sorry about the typo there, from urban development. And I've already talked about the opportunity cost for this land. It's not scalable to include regional and sub-regional communities. Martin is apparently in desperate need of a new wastewater treatment plan. I don't know about the others. So where does this leave us? I'm afraid to say the most expensive option, which is a 30-kilometre pipeline leading 2 kilometres offshore and 20 metres deep with a diffuser on the end of it. This is known technology. 75% of wastewater in New Zealand goes to sea in this manner. There will be negligible environmental impacts within 120 metres of the pipe outflow. There's no pollution, there's no impact on Kaimoana. It is a permanent solution which is scalable for future growth, and it can include regional and sub-regional communities. They can easily piggyback on this. This is our chance to do the right thing for the next 100 years. And if we do the wrong thing here, I fear that we will be revisiting this in 30 years' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very well-researched presentation, Bruce. We have a question from, are you happy to take questions?
Absolutely.
Yes, so we have a question from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Bruce, for coming in and speaking to us. From reading your submission, I'd expected to rev up about the dangers of cycling in Vogel Street.
Yeah.
But we'll stick to the matters that you raised today. Thank you. It was a well considered and presented perspective. I just wanted to understand a little bit of, I guess, what brings you to the topic, perhaps beyond just your interest in the community. Do you have professional involvement in this area? It looked like some of your details around soil maps, et cetera, were quite, I guess, well-researched from my perspective, and just wanted to know how you'd come to this information and perspective.
I'm interested in this because of, I suppose I know some of the farmers out in the area, which I believe this is, the pipe is going to go to for land discharge. And their concerns, which are social concerns, led me to do some research. And it's not hard to find. It's pretty easy to find this information. I'm not a soil scientist. I don't profess to be. I'm a pathologist at the hospital. But the information is readily available.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the submission.
Councillor Findlay.
Just a point of clarification, you talked about the land that is needed to on land. You said 700 acres, but on the presentation it said 1,700. So
1,740 hectares is what
1,740. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Bruce. You spent a lot of time talking about the implications of discharge to land, and you sort of finished with a kind of a slide on why you think discharge to sea is better. Do you have any comment around Maori cultural requirements and whether or not you think that discharge to sea would be acceptable?
I understand there are cultural concerns, equally cultural concerns about discharge to river. They value those bodies of water, and understandably so. We are not in a position really to do much else. We are landlocked to Palmerston North. We have to, in the end, by doing land-based water discharge, we may in fact end up polluting the river. It's highly likely to cause increased leaching, and we won't achieve what we want. So we will, by default, actually end up polluting the river and causing concern with the local Maori. I understand their cultural concerns, but as I said, this does not impact on their ability to collect kaimoana. It's 2 kilometres offshore and 20 kilometres deep, and it is used widely throughout New Zealand. So I'm not sure why they would have specific concerns, cultural concerns.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It's an answer, yes, thank you.
Well, thank you once again, Bruce. That brings us to the end of the allotted time. Your submission will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that also brings us to the first part of this session, councillors. We have a short break and we'll be reconvening 10 to 11. Because we still have 7 submissions to go. And all the guests and submitters, they are welcome to have a cup of tea or coffee just outside the room. Welcome back, councillors, guests. We might restart our session. So we have our next submitter, Ross Linklater. And welcome, Ross. I guess you understand the traffic light system right here? Just, you're welcome. You may start whenever you're ready.
Good morning, councillors. For those of you who don't know me, and I think most of you do, I'm Ross Linklater. And I wish to speak to my submission on option 2 in your Nature Calls program, which I believe is the one to follow, which is slightly contrary to your previous speaker. I appreciate the necessity of removing nitrogen and phosphorus to alleviate periphyton in the river. And whilst the same elements can be put to good use, encouraging growth for both crops and forestry. However, to purchase a volume of land close to the city would be difficult both to acquire in sufficient volume and very expensive. As we heard previously, the recommendation in the book is for 1,740 hectares, which in old-fashioned terms is 4,200 acres. It is a lot of land. And to acquire that amount of land close to the city, and presumably in one block, would not be easy, and it would certainly be very expensive. The cost of piping to coastal sand country would be greater, but land volume and price should be considerably easier. If wastewater managed to enter the underground aquifer, then a coastal location should be very much more preferable than one close to the city. Research on subsurface irrigation for commercial growing of vegetable crops for human consumption or for livestock, I believe should be evaluated. Plastic trickle lines are buried about 200 millimetres below the surface, and plants obviously grown above. The lines are recorded with GPS technology, so care is taken when planting successive crops. The moisture and the nutrients are absorbed through crop roots, but no wastewater touches the foliage. This form of irrigation is widely used in Australia, with water from the Murray River growing tomato crops. Subsurface irrigation should prevent unpleasant odour from occurring from any wastewater. Forestry shelter belts could assist to prevent wind damage whilst earning carbon credits and eventually be harvested. The rationale behind my comments is that all options being considered have considerable costs and all have some ongoing costs. This option would have establishment costs but should provide some offsetting income in the future. In conclusion, I'm a semi-retired farmer without any particular expertise in this subject, but I feel the concept of putting these valuable nutrients and moisture to income earning potential should be properly evaluated and considered. The area where the water is irrigated in Australia is near Echuca, and very large areas are done in this manner with growing tomatoes. But as I said, I'm not an expert, but I think the experts should be studying this as a potential option. If there is any seepage that gets down into an aquifer and filters out to the ocean, I think is certainly preferable to the option of the previous speaker of pumping it directly to the ocean. The surrounding land would act as a filter. Wide open to questions.
Thank you, Ross. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ross. Just wanted to understand, I guess, because you've probably had opportunity to think about this over time, if your perspective on this has evolved over time, or is this sort of a long-standing view, the potential value of using irrigation and nutrients?
I guess it's human nature that, particularly from the farming perspective, nitrogen and phosphorus are very valuable nutrients for growing foliage, growing crops. To turn around and not be able to put it to use seems a crying shame. There is a large farming operation on coastal sand country growing processed crops for food companies, but it is using irrigated groundwater. It is not using wastewater discharge. That particular family might be well encouraged to even consider it. I haven't run it past them, but the knowledge, and that was partly disclosed by the previous speaker, land that is close to the city is high quality land, particularly in the southern area, and he made reference to land near the Oruro River. To my mind, sand country is an unlocked potential as what this other farming family is doing by growing the processed crops they are, and on a large scale, will certainly support growth. When you've got a product that has high nutrient value, but feed it under the plant rather than spray irrigate it so the leaves are all in contact with it, are two different options. And I believe it should be technically evaluated and see whether there's good ground for it.
Thank you. If I might follow up. So I guess the process that we've been in has seen sort of two stages of community feedback come in, and the most recent stage had really only identified, or let's say prioritized, three options, and irrigation in the sand country wasn't one of those. So just to be, I guess, very clear about your submission, we should be going back to a more holistic view and reviewing some of those earlier options and potentially making a decision on that sees one of those as the favored option.
I don't think it's really terribly different. I mean, you do have land discharge here, but what I'm talking about is subsurface discharge rather than above surface discharge. And I think that's two very different issues. Taupo at one stage was doing surface discharge and growing lucerne crops, which in turn were used as cattle fodder. Now, your previous speaker said dairy cows would not be acceptable. I don't know the background of guaranteeing that, but yes, there is certainly a lot of beef cattle that are fed, but I think the plant, my concept is that the plant is doing a filtering job itself by absorbing just elements that it's needed up through its roots. But I'm not an expert, and I certainly want to have that well noted.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to the size of land that we need, and you made mention around the potential cost to acquire that, have you got some thoughts around the financial limitations that size of acreage for that purpose presents?
Again, I don't, and I don't know how the people that researched this book came up with that figure. and it's a means of having to go back to them. And I believe it could well be that if you're trying to irrigate over heavy clay country or whatever, or if it is country near a river, that the density of irrigation could be different than the sand country. But again, I don't have the expertise for to really speak with authority on it. But I think there must be some scientific expertise out there that could give the right answers to council.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ross, once again for your submission, and it will be discussed in the final deliberations. Thank you very much. Our next submitter is Sylvan York. Welcome, Sylvan. I guess you understand the traffic light system? Thank you. You may start when you are ready.
My name is Sylvan York, and I'm chair of Green Corridors. I have Brian Finch beside me, so thinking about we do support the 10-year plan program ID 1145, Green Corridors project. Also, mindful of goal 4, Eco-City strategy, in particular priority 3, regenerate native biodiversity.
Thank you. The 2018 10-year plan allocated $62,000 to Green Corridors with modest increases in following years. But the area under our control is now quite large, including a significant riparian portion of the Turitea stream and many of the ephemeral gullies in the Summerhill area and on the ranges side of the Manitou River. We are becoming involved in new areas off Paetua Track, that's Kingsdale, and Springdale Grove, which has just come under our mandate, and other areas will come under our mandate in the future, beyond Summerhill, up the roads there, past the college and so on. We are a committee of 6 people working with moral support from Source to Sea and the Environment Network Manawatu. Our meetings are held at the City Council building, and Representative Horizons and Doc attend those meetings. We have about 20 volunteers working with us and several groups who join us on occasional weeding days. We have an average, I was surprised at this, but it was correct, that we work an average of about 70 hours per week across the area, mainly weeding and with winter planting. All of the funding we receive is spent on contractors who do the seed collection, seedling production, and co-management of the land, mainly preparation for planting. The contractors don't invoice us, they invoice the City Council. So Green Corridors is not a society or a trust or anything. We're volunteers working with the City Council staff on making this happen. The invoice contractor is mainly Totara Glen Nurseries, who is doing an excellent job, in our opinion. So much of the land that we have under our mandate is planted in pioneer species, which have a lifetime of about 20 years. So these are the Manuka, Kanuka, Kawakawa, and so on. And we've been operational for about that same period of time, and we're seeing signs of collapse in the established areas further up the Turitea stream or up the valley. And it's time that we accelerate planting of the canopy species like Miro, Kakatea, and Totara, Rimu, and so on. These canopy trees will ensure the long-term survival of these bush areas, as well as providing a better and wider variety of food source for the birds and insects and so on, the river species as well. The pioneer species cost about $3.50 per plant nowadays. And the enrichment species, or the canopy, what I was calling the canopy species, cost about $6 a plant. Now, we are kind of encouraged to plant about 20,000 new plants a year. So you can see the numbers don't add up when you're wanting to plant the establishment species, which are the ones we really need to be putting into the ground now. So it's really problematic. The area is getting too large for volunteers to maintain weed control. So that's the second issue that I wish to highlight. We have problems with blackberry, convolvulus, old man's beard, Tradescantia, and so on. And these are species that, as you know, the creepers, the old man's beard, that they kill off the existing plants because they smother them. But Tradescantia is in the undergrowth and prevents the seedlings penetrating, the ones that may have been spread by bird life. We cannot maintain the desirable level of planting and weeding on our existing budget. This is the first time in my 6 years as Chair of Green Corridors that I'm here specifically to ask for an increase in funding. While we realise that the City Council has some big budget issues, we've just heard about them in the last couple of presenters, like the wastewater management, we request a funding increase of about $30,000, and this would give our total budget somewhere around 100, because we've been escalating, the budget has been escalating each year from the last round. We don't want to lose the benefit of our past investment. That's your investment in the money, the City Council staff working with us, and all that volunteer hours that have gone in over the years to see areas collapse or not be evolving in an appropriate way for our future. We have a real synergy operating here, with cash and support from the Council and great work from the community. Let's keep it going. Hei kona mai I roto ngā mihi. Goodbye for now and thanks.
Thank you, Sylvan. Are you happy to take some questions?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a question from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sylvan. Thanks, Brian. I guess my perhaps naive understanding of how secession was going to work in those plantings was that the birds would be installing those longer-term species for free during their visits over the 10 or 20 years of those pioneer species growing. So that isn't happening? No. We're not seeing new species come in that might over time?
Brent, that was my expectation too, but naively. But as I've got more involved, and we're seeing collapsing plantings around New Zealand now. In fact, it's quite obvious. If anyone's walked the Esplanade track north of Pukerua Bay, it's the Te Raroa walkway called the Esplanade, you can see collapsing bush there. People have planted large areas, you know, like 20, 25 years ago. So, and what's happening with us is there's, the issues are the birds aren't sadly seeding because we have a lot of grass growing in amongst the trees, and the grass prevents the seeds from germinating. But also it's the Tradescantia and other weeds that are becoming an enduring problem for us. In spite of those 70 hours a week, it's just not enough. Now this is like 20 people doing 3 hours each sort of thing, a morning a week kind of approach.
Thanks for that clarification. So then if we were to bring this additional resource, like, would that see you right for some time into the future, or is this going to be an escalating problem of needing to transition from $3 seedlings to $6 seedlings?
Well, there is that transition which I think is fundamentally important for this program now, the Green Corridors program, but it's also to enable the our nurseryman to do more work, and so we'd like to see his budget increased because he can do more extensive spray weeding. So he can get a quad bike with a spray tank on the back, he's certified sprayer, so he can spot spray the particular weeds. We're going in there with hand saws, dabbing on poison on the recently cut bits of plant and so on. So we're doing the best we can. But the job is just really getting too big for us as it stands with the existing budget. Right. And I think the synergy of the volunteers with the nurserymen is excellent. It's a great relationship with him and Totara Glen. So we'd really like that to endure and grow for the sake of the, you know, it's, sorry, I'm banging on about it now, but this is a 100-year story. It's not, I'm not really going to see the benefits of my lifetime. It's really for the whole society's future.
Thank you.
10 years.
Yeah, before going to Councillor Dennison's questions, can I ask you the prices you have quoted for two different stories of plants?
Yes.
Are these the nursery prices or including plant into ground?
No, these are actually the nursery prices. The plant into the ground costs more. Some areas where it's nice soil, we can easily put the plants in, but in parts of the Turitea stream in particular, it's very gravelly. So we actually have to dig a hole, put a little bit of soil in, and then put the plant in because that's old stream bed, it's very gravelly. But we think, you know, we're committed to ensuring planting occurs, because once they're actually established through the gravel, it should be okay.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to inquire around the volunteer hours per annum. Have you got some sort of idea what sort of total that would?
No, but I guess it's around about 70 hours a week, but probably not for 52 weeks. I guess people, but we have really passionate, Brian can back me up on this, he does more of the weeding than I do, and you just have to multiply it by, I guess, a normal working year. Was it 48 weeks or something? But we know some people go out more often than a morning. Often they go out to a community spirit thing. They'll go out, do 3 hours of weeding, and then go and have a coffee together, kind of thing. And they pay for their own coffees. It's not on the council budget.
Great. So there's no sort of capture of the hours that.
Well, there's been an analysis done that gave me the 70 hours a week as the round number. So you just multiply that by the number of weeks. People are doing it all year round. We've got some of the people who are volunteers of that 20 plus volunteers, they're actually living adjacent to the gullies. But some of them, the committee members, they just come from around town and they just do the little bit on occasional basis.
It's great. It's very evident now, the results of what's been achieved, and so I think it's worthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvan. Thank you, Brian. We do have some more questions, but we finished the allotted time. I thank you for your presentation, and it will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our next submission is from Horizons Regional Council, and we have Fiona Gordon and Jade Shirley. Welcome, team, and I guess I don't need to explain the traffic light system. So you may start when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair and councillors and officers. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in support of the long-term plan today. I'd like to introduce Jed Shirley, our GM Regional Services and Information, who will be doing most of the talking today. But I guess just in summary, before we head into this, there'll be three topics really that will be touched on. The first being Three Waters, Nature Calls and the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water. The second topic being climate change. And on that note, I'd just like to take this opportunity to say that Horizons very much looks forward to working with Palmerston North City Council on the recently formed Joint Committee on Climate Action. And the third topic that we'll cover off will be transport. And with that, very short and sweet, I'll hand that over to Jed.
Kia ora, morena councillors, and thanks Fiona. We'll take the submission largely as read, and I think it's fair to say that we think it's, if you want to put a phrase around it, it's a good news kind of submission in terms of a lot of the tone in here is about wanting to acknowledge the work that we're doing together with you and you with us, and not to mention the other territorial authorities in these spaces that are talked about here. And we're very mindful of the plethora of legislation coming out of central government at the moment, for a lot of it for good reason, but kind of in here we're trying to acknowledge the uncertainty that's attached to some of that, especially Three Waters type reviews, the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management and the environmental standards that are attached to some of that as well. And I guess we're just acknowledging, the challenges that you have locally with that, and of course in our role as well. And that's why I think the closer we're working together and dovetailing in and making things happen for the community, the better. And I know that you get that, but I guess, and Fiona's touched on it, in terms of that uncertainty, I know that you've made some significant, and we've acknowledged here the Nature Calls program that you've got going, and also the significant investment that you have within your LTP to try and mitigate and allow for some of the work to be done around Three Waters, especially wastewater and things like that. So I guess all we're doing there is just saying, yep, there's a lot more work to go, but we acknowledge that significant investment that you've put in place there. In climate change, Fiona talked about the Joint Climate Action Committee. That's a great initiative, and I think we're all looking forward to what will come out of the regional risk assessment work. I think it's due later this year, September, October, and we're all going to have some things to do with that. And I suppose on behalf of the chair, who couldn't be here today, she's mentioned a few times that we need to actually make it more than just, you know, a committee that gets together and a plan and a risk assessment, but actually do some tangible things with that. So, and noting our place as a region within the broader New Zealand family, it's not easy, and it's not an easy subject, but I think the good thing is, and we think the good thing is, that there's some stuff, there's things happening in that space. So, lastly, transport. Probably break that down into strategic sort of planning and more, and then the passenger transport aspect. The strategic planning work that's been going on, and I myself have been heavily involved with, is energising, I'd say, and the opportunities that are around for Palmerston North, particularly with things like the distribution freight hub, and attached to that being the Kiwi Rail Freight Hub and the Palmerston North Integrated Transport Improvements. While we're talking about climate change and all the work we have to do there, you know, we will acknowledge that the investment in this part of the region is way behind where it probably should be, especially in terms of the growth that we're expecting and getting anyway with population. So I guess just wanting to highlight and thank you for your participation and support to things like accessing Central New Zealand and working within the Accelerate 25 regional growth initiative. There's a lot more to be done there, but I think that joined up advocacy that I know your mayor and others have been involved in has been really helpful for securing, and we you know, things just like the commitment by the government to Otaki to North Levin. That's a key project that again is going to help unlock this part of the region, but also, you know, just re-emphasising our focus is on getting the Kiwi Rail Freight Hub designation in place, the Palmerston North Integrated Transport Improvements, and overarching that, the distribution hub work that I know the city's actually leading that piece of work. So as a regional council, we're just saying it's great to be sitting alongside you and supporting that, given our broader regional role. And then moving into passenger transport, you know, that is another key leg of the stool, and it's an area it's challenged a little in what we like to say is a rural region, but what I've found encouraging is we're not letting that get in the way of actually making a change. I know in our LTP there's nearly 3 million set aside in year 3 to improve the services in Palmerston North, and the local share of that's 1.4 million. Where I'm going to with that is the joined up work we've been doing with your officers and some of your political leaders via the advisory group is well underway now. We're looking to go out for consultation later this year on several options for improving the services in Palmerston North. This is a chance for a step change, and I think what's encouraging is at this point anyway, as recently as last week, I think the council approved all that via its deliberation process, and it's what happens now that's really going to make a difference. So it won't be perfect, but I think we're signalling a real change to try and make things a bit different and better, but affordable as well. That's always a challenge with that space. So I wouldn't want to stop here. I just want, without mentioning the transit hub that's been proposed as part of the Streets for People program, another thing that which is so cool because, you know, you can't do passenger transport, for example, without it fitting into the infrastructure of the city because it's for the city. And I know with working with David Murphy and your team, I get a lot of comfort that we're quite well joined up and making sure that these things will fit together. So, as I said, a pretty good news submission from our point of perspective anyway, and a lot to look forward to. That's all I've got. I've probably said too much, but that's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you both. Just in regards to the urban bus service and the review, have we got to the point where we have confirmed now the system and the number of buses that we'll need in the terminal for in the central city?
No, because, well, we've confirmed it insofar as we've workshopped and had modelled a couple of, we've narrowed down to several options. It's fair to say that the current loop system will be gone, I'd say, and that it's a lot of transiting and through type operations, and I'm trying to simplify it's actually not that simple. The actual final outcome we won't sort of have a handle on until later this year after we've gone out to the community, because they will cost different amounts of money. But it's fair to say there will be still, for some services, a point where, you know, a service will stop while another one comes in and they change. But we're looking to, and that's why we're working with your officers and your politicians to make sure that we minimise the amount of, or the footprint, if you like, of vehicles both in the square and in the Main Street area. That said, we are looking for growth, remember. We're looking to increase patronage, so there'll be a bit of a trade-off. Coupled with that too will be what is the type of service, you know, what are the vehicles like? We would all like to move to a more zero-emission type method of transport, but it'll be an affordability thing as well. So, because we know that we're mindful of that also is what also impacts on shop owners and things like that. So that's a long answer, but we're not in a position to know exactly yet, but we're moving in that direction.
Yep, and we appreciate the engagement. It's good to have an end in sight. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have time for a quick question again from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Jed. Just a lot of good news there. Wanted to pick up around the freshwater side of it in terms of we do have a number of farms that actually sit within the city boundary as well, and sort of how far down the track we might be in terms of all of those farms, having farm plans, having riparian plantings, et cetera. Be really nice for the city to be able to own that as part of who we are as an eco-city, that all of our farms have those sort of basics in place.
Yeah, Fiona might be able to expand on that. Certainly the farm planning aspect has been, probably it's fair to say it's been more targeted into the Sustainable Land Use Initiative work that's been about preventing erosion and sediment in the waterway, therefore, you know, the raising of the beds in the rivers and therefore bigger stop banks. But in the flatlands, if you like, in the dairy sector, the focus has been more over the other side of the ranges, probably in the more intensively farmed areas. But I'm not sure exactly how many farm plans there are and where they are in terms of this, but I can get back to you on that. I would say, though, that as part of the MPS on freshwater management and the NES that's associated with that, farm planning in New Zealand is being standardised and being made more consistent. So it's a really good approach, but the next step and the step change for New Zealand is to make those very consistent across New Zealand. So I probably haven't answered you fully, but I think we could get back in touch with exactly what the status of those are. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I will make sure that we get back to you on the numbers of farm plans in the city boundaries. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you both for your presentation, submission, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So we are changing the order a little bit just to, can I invite Jill Rapson for the next submission? Because she has been waiting very patiently for a very long time.
Well, thank you, folks. Appreciate is this thing on? How do I push? I'll move over. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to the council briefly. And it's really nice that the council continues to accept public submissions, because it really is its major opportunity to talk formally with members of the public. You've read my submission, or if you haven't, you could if you felt like it. I'm not sure it's very sensible. My real issue was that I was a bit concerned about this eco-city concept, and this is what I want to discuss with you today. When I saw that, I had a bit of a laugh, which seemed rather cruel in retrospect, so I had to think about why I thought it was funny. And then I decided I probably thought it was tragic because I don't get the feeling that this is an eco-city, and it could be promoted much more into the ecological sustainability sphere, and I would like to see that happening. It's actually a very green and pleasant city, but from my point of view, it more resembles a mega racetrack of vehicles. I'm a cyclist by preference, but I never cycle anywhere near the square. It's far too dangerous, and I'm too cowardly to even think about it. And because the Palmy driver has this theory that cyclists and pedestrians are fair game. And this is very uncomfortable to live with. So I feel that there's some attitude shifts that are needed. And they need to be promulgated both through the general public, but also through the council, because the long-term plan is, despite Horizon's happiness, is not as green as I would like to see a long-term plan being. It's not really focused on sustainability. It's not really understanding the future impacts of climate change, or the current impacts of climate change, which is going to be far bigger problem for the council than Nature Calls will ever be. And Nature Calls is driving you loony at the moment, I can see that. So climate change in the council's long-term plan seems to me to be a bit like a failed sewer line in Featherston Street, and you'll dig it up and fix it, and then everything will be all right. I think the problem is going to be so complex, it's going to be something that we're going to be living with every day for the next 100, possibly 1,000 years. So we need to bite the bullet on that and get greener. One of the examples for that, for me, is the council's biodiversity strategy, which I see mentioned in the long-term plan, but I don't really see a biodiversity strategy, and I have to confess I'm not quite sure why I should see one for urban areas, though there are bush areas in Palmy that need biodiversity strategies. And when I was looking around for your policy on eco-sourcing, it applied to riparian plantings only, as if that were the only sort of restoration planting that we do. And even Green Corridors is planting extensively around non-riparian strips as well. So there's all sorts of areas there for improvement. One of the ways we could engineer attitude shifts outside the council is to make it clear to the public of Palmy that we need a much more sustainable approach to life in general, and that means we have to get away from the mantra that four wheels is the approved mode of transport, and that growth is a good thing. It's quite nice that trees grow. I've been measuring trees for 30 years, so I'm all in favour of their growing, but population growth is effectively non-sustainable. So if we're trying to grow the size of our urban area, it sounds positive, but actually it's a sustainability disaster. Now, it's going to grow whether we want it to or not, because the rest of the planet is not going to look at New Zealand and think, well, they should just stay over there in their quiet little COVID-free bubble with a very low density of people, and we can just occupy some of that land. So sooner or later, the population is going to have to increase. But I think we need to move away from an economics model that says growth is good, because growth fuels demand, and that fuels the demand for supply, and all of that is not part of a sustainability loop. So how might we go about changing public attitudes? Well, one thing I've been promoting for some time is the spread of green paint on our roads. And a couple of days ago, I actually noticed some green paint. This is a little cycle with the bike shed roof over it, which I understand means make way for cyclists. I'm not quite sure what it means, actually, but I know it appeared around a couple of roundabouts, and I thought that was good. But as I was driving the car at the time, I didn't really notice it at all. And if I were a cyclist, I wouldn't be believing in its safety zone. But when you're in other parts of the world, and principally Amsterdam, where I have spent some time, the rules there are quite clear that pedestrians have right of way over cyclists, and cyclists have right of way over vehicles. And if you're involved in a contretemps between a vehicle and a cyclist, then the vehicle is guilty by default. There is no further discussion on that subject. And the consequence of that is that in the centre of Amsterdam, in the main squares, vehicles sort of wiggle in between the pedestrians, and the cyclists whiz around, and everybody gets on perfectly well with each other. And it's all without benefit of traffic lanes and traffic lights. So we could, I feel, get that pot of green paint out and paint the entire of the square, the roads around the square, green, rip out all those daft traffic lights, and they're quite nice and ice blocks, by the way, and then maybe paint the areas around the square, the streets around them, green as well, and turn the town into a pedestrian cycling hub. It's not going to stop vehicles, because vehicles are allowed there too, but they need to learn to live with each other. And they do that perfectly in Amsterdam. Now, it's not that easy, because the Amsterdam folk get on a bike at 3 months old. You'll see a mother biking off to work with 3 kids on one bicycle. So they're very used to cycling, and they're much better at it than we are. But over time, we could green the city centre, and that might change the attitudes in the town. And then we could start greening some other things, like we could just have a town-wide ban on incinerators, which have got to be the most evil device ever contributing to the nature calls problem that we're facing now. And we could introduce all sorts of other green ideas progressively. We could start putting compost heaps in each neighbourhood. I mean, my neighbours come and use my compost heap as it is. I know for some habitations that's not going to be possible, but commercial compost heaps that you could visit with your rubbish. I know we're talking about compost collection, but what are you going to collect them in? I bet it's going to be plastic. That's not going to help. And we need to just increase these green initiatives and maybe have a regular turnover of them, so there's new ones all the time, so the people and the mindsets are greening up. And I think I should shut up at that point.
Thank you, not for shutting up, for presenting this.
You're the first person who's ever said that.
So, do you have any questions, councillors? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jill. Just picking up on some of the specifics in your wide-ranging written submission. You were critical of the low-carbon fund, which is one of the few specific budgetary responses that the council is making to climate change in terms of mitigation, and just wanted to understand if your concern was around the sort of unspecified nature of what was going to happen within that fund, and also any comments on the appropriateness of the scale of that fund.
Well, the Climate Change Commission is planning on a 1.5C climate change, and it's working to direct New Zealand towards that. Ecologically speaking, I can't see that climate change stopping it under 4C. So cutting a few vehicles off the roads, planting a few pine trees, even planting a few native trees, is not going to sop up enough CO2 to make a difference. We need a whole attitude shift away from production of carbon dioxide. And also, of course, methane's the other problem. So, yes, unspecified, way too little, way too late. Better late than never. Well, we've got to do it sometime. But we won't keep climate change under 1.5.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you once again, Jill, for your submission, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the final deliberations. So our next submitter is Mr. Kevin Riley.
Kia ora. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? I'm only going to take a few minutes here, Dr. Butt, okay? Because I presume you can all read. I would have read my submission. Mine is I'm going to take you on a magical mystery tour, but I would like to see the council consider was putting some of the street names in Maori, in the central business district, just to add a bit of, we're a very cosmopolitan town anyway, and this would go some way to make us stand out a little better for the people to come here. We don't have tourists, we have visitors. And I would really like the council to consider doing that. It's no huge expense going to happen here. And it's just like a lot of European cities. I'm Irish, where I come from, things are in English and in Irish. And it's just, I just think it's wonderful, you know what I mean? It just kind of adds a bit of, the place is alive, you know what I mean? It gives it a bit of difference compared to other, particularly New Zealand with other cities. And yeah, get out my notes. Don't worry, this is Irish stuff I'm going to do after this, go to the radio programme. They don't have any in New Zealand, because I've written to the Minister of Local Government, Mahuta, haven't heard back yet, you know. But I'm Irish, so we're pretty determined people, and we just sort of battle on, you know. I'd also think this, in many ways, could possibly up the voting numbers in the local body elections. It's a possibility, okay, that people take a lot more interest in what's happening in the city. And on that, I would like you to actually, I think I mentioned in my submission at some stage, about putting out a newsletter like they used to do with the Tribune, I think it was, no, it don't mean many years ago, but a few years ago. And it just kind of just disappeared. And I thought that was a really useful little tool for the government to inform the citizens of what you're thinking about and what you think is possible, et cetera, and just keeps people up with the play, sports, whatever. And I know you can't do it through the newspaper. You could do it through the Standard, but not everybody buys even the Standard anyway. Just put it in outside supermarkets, the Plaza, somewhere like that there. Make it a monthly or bi-monthly. I just think it's a really good, cheap idea as well, just to keep the citizens informed of, you know, what direction you guys are thinking of moving, et cetera. And what else I want to talk about? Trees, 150th anniversary. I'd like to see every school in the city plant a tree and have a plaque. There's no point in just sticking a tree in there. You've got to have a plaque of why. The 50th anniversary of, you okay there, Dr. Butt?
Sorry.
Yes, I think, excuse me, I think that's not a bad idea. You know, just plant a tree. I think you can get them for free, in fact, from some of the organisations, but all you'll have to pay for would be a plaque. And I think it's a really good way of commemorating the anniversary of the 150 years, and hopefully it'll be around for possibly another 150 years. But my main thing, basically, is the Maori street names, just in the city centre, you know, the central business district. I think I would add a lot of, not so much colour, but it would add a lot of, you know, let us know that there is diversity in this city, you know, like I said, because we get a lot of people coming through here. Like I said, we only have visitors, we don't do tourists, but there's lots of stuff with the universities, the army bases, and the science centres. I mean, thousands of people come through here for those various sort of, you know, occasions. And what I come to, look, I've down here, you could see it, right? It's got this, the past we inherit, the future we build. So just think about that, you know what I mean? Don't forget, like, democracy, the read for the Maori Street Name, doesn't cater for minorities, okay? I mean, that's just common sense. You all know that, you know, I hope. I don't know, I suppose if you do go ahead with what I think you will at some time, you know, there's always going to be a few rednecks who are going to moan and bitch, you know, but you just ignore them, okay? So they just, you know, the kind of arguments they put up, they don't have any argument. This is, you know, we are, you know, not so much two people, one nation, yes, but there are two, you know, the English language and the Maori language are recognised as official languages, and I think it's about time we actually put some stuff, recognised that through street signage. And it's only the city centre we're talking about here. We're not talking about every damn street in the city, you know. I don't know, that's about all I've got to say. I've got tons I could talk about, but I'm Irish, so I'll shut up. Anyway, have you got any questions?
Thank you, Kevin. We have a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Kevin, for coming and talking to us.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very good, and how are you?
Grand.
So I just wondered if you'd managed to have a chat to anyone from Rangatane about your suggestion, to see what the response was?
I've been in touch with Wiremu Didn't get any reply, you know what I mean? Same as Mahuta, haven't heard any thing back. But I'm always optimistic, you know. And I've written to other people. I mean, I've sort of been in touch with academics up in Waikato. You know, I've sort of tapped into them. I just came across them, doing some research. And I got on like a house on fire. And she's very interested in what was going to happen here in Palmerston North, by the way, you know.
Okay. So you haven't had feedback, either positive or negative, from
No, none.
Okay.
But I haven't, nothing's negative, okay? I've even spoken to the Irish ambassador and he thought it was a good idea. I was with him about
Sure
2 or 3 weeks ago, you know?
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. That exhausted all the questions. Thanks for your submission, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the final deliberations.
Anytime, Zofika.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much and have a wonderful weekend.
So next we have Val Burr.
Feet on my face, walking down those steps. Okay, actually first would like to add to his one. Why not mark where the Papaioia clearing started and ended around the city? And that's unrelated to the power station, but it just crossed my mind as I was sitting there. Anyway, back to this. So this is the Palmerston North Power Station that I'm representing here, which is effectively a plea for the survival of our building as much as anything. It's very easy for people to look at your city council buildings and that are earthquake prone and just tick off the various ones that are not particularly, you know, interesting according to whoever's doing the looking. The power station is a Category 1 listing on your heritage building list. I don't know if Heritage New Zealand ever considered listing it in the past, but we've never looked into it. Partly we've never looked into it because it can come with things that are a bit more scary and we might want to change something and we'll be in trouble. So we've left that. I'm on the committees of 3 industrial heritage buildings, the power station obviously, the Hoffman Kiln, as you might have seen, you saw me here yesterday, and Ormondville Railway Station, and I've been on that one for about 25 years. I'm also currently working on matters relating to Square Edge and Acacia Birch House, which are both City Council owned buildings that are listed as quake prone. It's very easy to think that just because buildings are old that they can be just cast aside. In particular, industrial heritage buildings can look especially expendable, as I've just pointed out. However, these are potentially the ones that would be the greatest loss in the long term. They're part of old technology. We have the task of trying to explain how they worked, and doing that is much easier if the building is still standing. However, preserving them is hard work with many hurdles to scramble across. Industrial heritage buildings are holes to throw money into. But how can we explain how something worked with just a picture and a fading memory? For example, what would happen if the power station's engines, other equipment, if you bowled the building? And when I sort of think about this particular aspect, I think about we had a problem with the engine one time and nobody knew how to fix it. It was like old technology. And then an old guy who lived in Paeatua at the time, who was from Scotland, came in and looked at the problem that we had. It was on an open day, looked at the problem we were having, pointed out that he used to repair these engines on fishing boats in the North Sea, and worked for the company. And he said, all you need is blah, 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 and it included 2 wooden dowels. And they put the 2 wooden dowels in and it worked perfectly. And you thought, well, you know, this is old technology. You know, you can look at these things and what we know nowadays, well, I don't, but the people who know what they're talking about with the engines know, and you can't explain it. And so, you know, this is the part of it. And with all the different equipment that's up there, like, for example, the things on the balcony, they're probably the only ones left in the world, according to the guy from Rayroll who came through the building maybe 10, 15 years ago. He was quite surprised to see them. So that even though they haven't been in use since the 1960s in that building, even they're still there. and they're still showing how they work, and you can still see the backings of them and figure things out from there. At the moment, there seems to be talk about the Southern Lakes being low, just like in 1992 when the power station was last used to generate electricity. While we have been told that this would be pretty much the last power station in New Zealand to ever be pressed into service due to the high cost of running the British polars, it pays never to say never. And we've also been told, what if the disaster had struck and the power station was gone, and this comment was made at the time, Armageddon would have to strike the Cook Strait cable, and we're like, Armageddon actually want to come and take photos there now, so you know, that's as at last week, so I don't quite know what Armageddon is nowadays, but like, who knows. At present, we have one regular open day per year, and that's part of Heritage Week. We work in conjunction with the Hoffman Kiln, which is really difficult when you're on both committees and you've got to try and do things. This we use with, typically would have 4 engine starts on the day, and so we do, alternate the engines to prove both go, and then on the 4 o'clock one, say 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock is all single engine, 4 o'clock is for us, and that's 2 engines. And that's the occasion when you can prove to the people who we've told to come back or who are lucky enough to be there, this is what it sounded like to work in a place like this when you were there and you wanted to have industrial deafness and all the rest of it. So it's an interesting thing that you can't really explain except by being there and seeing how it works. We also have other visits throughout the year by arrangement, and if there's an engine start involved, they pay a fee or extra fee. We go for donations and stuff. Donations get more money than asking for a fee. We've learnt that very quickly. This year we've had, in fact, I flicked my bit of paper, we've had the Auckland Steam Engine Society were through several months ago with Engine Start. We had a whole bunch of kids or young people from UCOL who came through who are doing engineering, the same type of work, and so they came through, and different other ones. We used to sort of get more of these types of things and be more active, but of course the earthquake strengthening means you've got to, go through all the motions and try and keep people, from freaking out. We don't get the elderly people coming through on bus trips quite the same, because as soon as they hear the word earthquake prone, oh no, we can't take it, and that. But the other ones give more money, so we sort of don't really mind that too much. Does that sound for being honest? Right, now, so, and numerous photographers come through, so Bruce up there, our committee, he arranges, he gets the one who has to go and show everyone through, and he also does the engine starts and catches the naughty people coming through the toilet window and sends them packing rather fast during the lockdown and stuff and that. Anyway, so some of the things we'd quite like to do, we'd quite like some assistance, if possible, at some point with signage around the place. And the ones that we look at are ones like at Salino Park, which I was involved with the work on that. Outside local halls, things that could have QR codes attached to them in the future, seeing as there are groups being set up like that. That's where the organisation here, where you've got some sort of standardised system that we don't have. Repairing the broken cable ducting outside the building in Keith Street would be quite helpful, because always it was a case of the council having to be responsible for exterior, but unfortunately that one got slipped through. And then also be responsible when we ask for the help for the building, as we don't seem to be eligible for to apply for council heritage funding due to the building being council owned. And such as when the toilet was wrecked by said person coming through the window. We were happy to pay for the new toilet, but because we knew the council was short of money at the time, because I'm on another committee and we knew that, because we were told. And I don't know how the experience of that was. But anyway, we didn't mind paying for it, but we'd like to sort of think we don't have to battle for something like a replacement toilet when a burglar's just landed on it and smashed it and blah, blah, blah. Questions from here, if anyone has any?
Do we have any questions, Councillor? I don't think we have any questions for you. That was very straightforward and well explained. Thank you very much for your
No worries.
submission, and we'll discuss it in the final deliberations. So the next submission is from Kate Eplin.
Tēnā tātou katoa. I'd like to acknowledge Mana Whenua and the Palmerston North City Council members present here today, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the LTP submission made by the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group. I'm Kate Eplin, Manager of Volunteer Central, and
Christine, from the Manawatu Multicultural Council.
The Welcoming Communities Advisory Group consists of several community agencies working together to make sure Palmerston North City is a welcoming city to all newcomers. The Manawatu Chamber of Commerce also signed the submission as a late signatory, therefore aren't noted on the document. The Welcoming Communities Advisory Committee is about to launch the Palmy Welcoming Communities Advisory Group Plan, hot off the press, from 2020 to 2023. We commend the Council for committing to this plan and look forward to your ongoing support to implement the plan. The Welcoming Communities Plan cannot be seen in isolation from other Council plans, with strong links present with the Connected Communities Plan, the Economic Development Plan, and the Active Citizenship Plan. The benefits of being a welcoming community has several socio-economic benefits for Palmy. In particular, employment opportunities, an increased pool of potential employees, international students, and by Palmy openly practising being a welcoming community, people are consciously going to seek Palmy out as a viable settlement option. The Welcoming Communities Advisory Group enables the voices of the community to be heard, to enable a wide diversity of representation on city decisions. Post-COVID has shown the importance of being a safe, welcoming and connected city, with people in the community caring and seeking to support all members of the community. We commend PNCC for being able to achieve this through successes such as inclusive leadership with city welcome sessions and mayoral welcomes for international students, translation of key aspects of Welcoming Communities Plan into 3 of the main former refugee languages spoken in the city, welcome packs available to newcomers, forums and festivals to support and empower ethnic groups to celebrate their culture, development of the Skilled Migrant Program, including an internship with PNCC, election flyers being translated into 14 languages, the Proverb Pathway resulting from the partnership with Rangatane, Massey University, PNCC and the wider community. However, there is still work to do to become a full welcoming community, and we seek Council support to continue your commitment to the plan, in particular support to address the following challenges: ensuring a safe environment for newcomers to express themselves, developing initiatives that cultivate multicultural awareness in children and youth, particularly cultural celebrations, promote connections to enable newcomers to have a sense of belonging, reduce language barriers, encourage businesses to become a welcoming and embrace diversity in the workplace, maintain Palmy's identity, including mana whenua tikanga and utilising the Treaty of Waitangi to further contribute to being a welcoming community. Celebrate public spaces that newcomers can culturally connect themselves with to improve a sense of belonging, e.g. themed playgrounds, flags from different nationalities, etc. I'd like to acknowledge that there are several other members of the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group in the gallery here as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the importance of council commitment with regards to developing a safe and connected Pāmi. And we'd like to open up for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Kate and Christine and the team in the gallery and here. And we have a question from the team member.
Well, with this hat on, thank you for your submission, and thank you also for being a part of the group, which is very important to us. I've been challenged by some people outside of the Palmerston North that we as a City Council don't have a multicultural strategy as such, and I wondered if you had a thought as to whether or not you felt we should have a multicultural strategy as a council. Because we don't have one. We have this programme, but there's no multicultural strategy. So I'd be interested, I haven't prepared them for this, that's why they're looking at me. So I'd be interested if you have any thoughts about that, first off.
Thank you, Lorna. I think it would be worth taking back to the group to have a discussion about. It would need to be a strategy that incorporated concepts of other plans that already exist. So would it be another piece of paper as opposed to a workable strategy? But it's worth discussing in the committee.
Okay, and then, if I may, Mr. Chair, we've had themes coming through quite a number of submissions yesterday and today of different groups being concerned about increasing racism, basically. We've heard from the Chinese community this morning, we heard from the Brazilian community, MMC mentioned it as well. I'd be interested in your thoughts as to whether or not you see a role for welcoming communities in this space, or whether you think that that's combating racism as a separate kind of issue.
Certainly it would be included in welcoming communities, and we do have New Zealand Police as part of the community group as well.
Did you have? Okay, all right then, thank you.
I think that exhausted all the questions. Thank you very much once again, and we'll discuss these submissions in the final deliberations. So we come to our final submission from Unions Manawatu, and we have Heather Warren to submit on their behalf. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, welcome everyone. I'm not sure I'm welcoming you. I'm used to running meetings, not being the person submitting, sorry. I recently read an article that said that millennials born between 1980 and 1984 are being referred to as geriatric millennials because we have the ability to operate in the analogue world and the digital world. And as such, please don't think I'm rude. I'm referring to my submission on my cell phone and my notes handwritten on a piece of paper I found in the office. So Unions Manawatu is the local committee of unions that make up the council or are affiliated to the Council of Trade Unions, and I am co-convener along with Dion Martin and Lindsay Higgins. I'm a union organiser for Te Hautu Kahurangi or Aotearoa, the New Zealand Tertiary Education Union, and I organise the staff out at Massey University. I'm going to take our submission as read, and I think what is maybe slightly different to the Unions Manawatu submission to some of the submissions I've heard is that we are asking you as a council to think about our local community and our community wellbeing by being great employers. We represent working people in the Manawatu area. And so there are a few things that we see the 10-year plan having the opportunity to do, and one of those is to address inequity, which seems to be growing at the moment. And as such, we think that the council has the opportunity to consider in their deliberations being a great employer by ensuring that the living wage is the minimum rate of pay that the employer pays their workers and their contractors. We think that the council could be a great employer by minimising work in the precariat. So there are a lot of positions within Palmerston North and particularly within the education sector that is a large employer in Palmerston North are fixed term or casual, so precariat roles, and they provide no stability and uncertainty to the people who fill those roles. And in the education sector, I recently heard them referred to as an industry standard, and I think if we are going to be a community-based and community-focused council, that we would ensure that those who work for us don't find themselves uncertain and unstable in their employment. We also had some key points that I will just highlight from our submission. The first is that we would like the council to consider in the community funding the inclusion of fundraising for charitable reasons. We believe that community wellbeing has strong investment in arts and environmental initiatives, and sometimes arts and environmental initiatives have fundraising for charitable purposes attached to them, and so we would like to highlight that we would like to consider expanding your scope for that. We also huge fans of the library, and this comes back to addressing inequity. We would like the council to increase funding to the library, particularly as it provides a community hub, and for many of our members in the community, it provides access to IT that they might not have in other situations. We, as a local Unions Manawatu group, support the increase in social housing that the council is in control of, and we would like to highlight that Palmerston North City Council social housing has been kind of noted as a standard for accessible housing in some, in other discussion, and we'd like Palmerston North City Council to continue to make sure that its social housing is accessible, particularly for vulnerable groups such as disabled people. It's really important that we think about how the city is accessible and how our sorry, words have gone from my brain. I've got a massive migraine. And how the people who live in this city can engage with social housing should they require it. We continue to commend and support Council's commitment to building and maintaining a relationship with Rangatani o Manawatu. Like any tiriti relationship, we like to refer to a relationship and remind the council that a partnership can be seen as unequal, and that we really value the relationship that council continues to have with iwi. I think I've blasted through everything that I wanted to say. If there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Heather. We do have a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Heather, for your submission on behalf of Unions Manawatu. In your conclusion, you've talked about encouraging Palmerston North City Council to increase community funding and further develop social housing. Are you able to quantify either of those things, like what you think is needed?
I'd like to say that I can. I'm presenting our submission on behalf of the group, and I would honestly say that Ben Schmidt, who is one of our members, was the person who wrote this document and compiled it. And so I think I could quite safely say, hand on heart, we just want more of all the good stuff that unions would advocate for.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Kate. You just talked about sort of the encouragement of funding into libraries. The adequacy of libraries in Palmerston North, you got any further comment on that in terms of locations and size and whatever?
I reside in Ashurst, so I'm a huge fan of the Ashurst Library, and I don't think that we have any comment to add on the locations or the sizes of libraries. I think that what we're saying is that these are hubs of our community and that they need to be supported in order to ensure that they are meeting the needs of the community.
Thank you, Heather. I'm sure we'll discuss these submissions in our final deliberations.
Perfect, thank you.
So that brings us to the end of proceedings in this session. Can I acknowledge all the presenters, their supporters, council officers and staff for their special help, and we'll be reconvening 1 o'clock. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tā.